My CEO wife thought I was weak and easy to bully, leaving traces of their love everywhere with an intern puppy. The puppy boy was even more shameless, privately sending me endless videos of their bedroom battles. But just when he thought he had me cornered, I went wild at the birthday party and turned into a completely different person. Not only did I publicly play their little videos, but I also pinned the lover down and rubbed it in his face. I didn't spare my wife either, slapping her 18 times right on the spot. Later, she knelt before me begging for forgiveness, but to her surprise, I didn't accept her apology. I was going to ruin their lives and make them fall from grace and lose everything. What she never expected was, I have two personalities inside me. The weak one is already dead. And now, what remains is the love killer, George. Chapter 1. I sat on the rooftop, looking down at the towering skyscrapers below. I said, George, I'm giving you this body, come out now. Standing on the edge of the rooftop, swaying dangerously, I was sure that George would never let me die. I hadn't taken the medication the doctor prescribed for a long time, all for this day. I waited for a long time, almost ready to give up, when George finally appeared. George was another personality hidden within me. George's lazy voice responded, "What's wrong? Willing to let go of your beloved Anna?" I stared into the distance, but my voice was firm as I said, "Yeah, I've let go." Memories cut through my mind like a knife. That day, I inexplicably opened the surveillance in Anna's break room and saw a scene I never wanted to witness. The wife who always said she loved me was in the break room with the new intern, acting out a side of her I had never seen. I closed my eyes, unwilling to face it, but the sounds were clear in my ears. The men said, "So, Anna, who excites you more, me or your husband?" Anna's forehead beaded with sweat, and after a long pause, she finally squeezed out a few words, "Of course, it's you." My heart skipped a beat, and I didn't want to watch anymore. Glancing at the small segment on my phone's screen, I saw that in the past year, there were dozens of instances where they had been sneaking around together. I snapped back to the present and spoke again. 7 days from now, this body will belong to you completely. The doctor prescribed the medication. Once I take it, one of us will inevitably disappear. George, are you listening? 7 days from now, it will be my birthday, and also my death day. As a child, I was calm and reserved. When a classmate slapped me in the bathroom, I didn't dare to tell the teacher, just hid in a corner and cried. My classmates saw me as easy prey and bullied me for more than a year. One day, when they locked me in the bathroom stall again, George appeared. He kicked open the bathroom door and went home. The next day, George went to school and beat up every student who had bullied me. From then on, no one dared to mess with me. Later, George would appear whenever I was in immense pain. I took one last look at the sky from the rooftop, and a tear slipped from the corner of my eye. This time, let George replace me forever. When I got home, I saw the slippers by the door and knew Anna hadn't come back yet. She said she was going on a business trip, and the intern Makoto would be going with her for a week. I had already seen it on Makoto's social media. Those fiery, ambiguous, unspeakable images had deeply shaken me. Standing by the window, I could see the Golden Hall in the distance, where brilliant fireworks were bursting. That was where we had gotten married. The entire sky was lit up by the fireworks, and the last time I had seen them was on our wedding anniversary. At that time, Anna had said, "My fireworks only bloom for you." I sneered. Her fireworks no longer bloomed just for me, because just now, Anna's fireworks order confirmation had been sent to my phone. I smiled and signed it directly. I went to the guest room and lay down. Ever since I learned of Anna's betrayal, my mind was filled with memories of Anna and me from our youth. We met in college, and she was the one who confessed to me. Even the proposal was initiated by her. She said, "Marry me, David, I can't wait anymore." Later, she became very determined. While I was still working step by step, she and her best friend founded Sue Group. She linked her arm with mine and said, "If others have it, David must have it too." Everything was for me. But after we had everything, Anna became restless. When Anna returned, I was already lying in bed. The sound of footsteps came from outside the door, and I quickly closed my eyes. The door creaked open, and Anna gently climbed into bed. Looking at my shallow breathing, she whispered, "Why are you in the guest room again? Do you want me to sleep here with you?" I didn't open my eyes and simply said faintly, "I sleep poorly. I just want some peace." Anna gently kissed my face and said, "I won't disturb you. Good night, David." That familiar scent of smoke. I had smelled it before, in the hidden cubicle of the office. The next morning, Anna woke me up. I immediately felt dizzy, nauseous, and the world spun. Just before I passed out, I collapsed onto the bedroom floor. "David, you're so hot. Don't scare me." In a daze, Anna anxiously dressed me and, with the help of the maid, supported me into the car, speeding to the hospital. She said, "It's okay, David. We'll be at the hospital soon." The car reached the hospital's emergency entrance. Before the door was even fully closed, Anna helped me rush into the emergency room. "Doctor. Nurse. My husband has a high fever. Someone come quickly." A nurse recognized her and said, "Isn't this Sue's Miss Sue? Come, put Mr. Wong here." The doctor gave me a thorough checkup. It turned out to be a fever caused by a bacterial infection. Yet, Anna was so anxious, still wearing slippers. I weakly looked at the exhausted face of the female CEO. If I didn't know about her affair with her secretary, I might still be immersed in the illusion of the happy marriage Anna had woven for me. My phone rang. It was a message from Makoto. He said, "David, faking illness isn't fun. Do you believe that if I wanted to, I could take her from you anytime?" I glanced at Anna, who seemed very tired. Her hand pressed against her temple, looking exhausted. If it were before, I would have had 1,000% confidence that Anna would stay with me. Because before, she had come to the hospital in grand fashion when something serious happened at the company. She had stayed with me until my 4 was finished, then hurried to leave after making sure I was back home. That time, the company lost millions. But now, I'm not sure. Chapter 2. Her phone was turned face down, vibrating slightly. I couldn't see anything on Anna's phone screen because the protective film had somehow turned into a privacy filter. Anna looked troubled as she said, "David, something urgent came up at the company." I looked away. I said, "Go ahead, I'll be fine." Anna sighed in relief and planted a deep kiss on my forehead. She said, "I'll take care of things and come back to keep you company as soon as I can." I watched Anna's back as she left, and faintly said, "There's no need." The nurse next to me was gossiping and secretly snacking. Someone said, "Look at Miss Sue. She's beautiful, powerful, and rich." Another replied, "Yeah. And she's so protective of her husband. Just now, she even told them to be gentle with his needle." Turns out, the strong love of a female CEO is quite the thing. If I were a guy, I'd be all over her. Yes, such a perfect wife, who wouldn't like her? Too bad, her acting is too good. She's fooled everyone with her pretended passion, but she still couldn't control her restless heart. But I'm tired. I don't want to play this game with her anymore. My nose felt stuffy, and my heart ached. Fine, it is what it is. The 4 finished, but Anna still hadn't shown up. When the nurse removed the needle, a long streak of blood followed. The bright red blood stained the entire bandage. The nurse quickly apologized, and even the head nurse came over. She said, "Sorry, Mr. Wong. She's new, and still not very experienced." I shook my head. The pain didn't even matter, and I said, "It's fine." After saying that, I got up and walked out. The phrase sounded familiar. The head nurse cautioned, "Mr. Wong, please press on the spot." I ignored her, letting the blood flow down my hand. The day after Makoto became the CEO's assistant, he spilled tea on my new suit pants. Makoto frantically wiped at the stain, looking as though I was humiliating him rather than the other way around. Before I could say anything, Anna spoke first. She said, "David, he's new, a bit clumsy. Don't be too hard on him." Makoto said, "Mr. Wong, you're not mad at me, right? How much were those pants? I'll pay for them." Anna naturally stood in front of Makoto, defending him. She said, "All right, you can leave now." I politely shook my head. Back then, Makoto didn't dare to be so openly provocative, but Anna gave him the confidence to challenge me. It seemed like from that day on, Anna's balance had shifted in Makoto's favor. I should have noticed earlier. I thought to myself, if it were George, what would he do? He'd probably punch him back, and not only that, he'd have Anna fire him. Sometimes, I really envy George. He could live freely without hesitation. But well, that day is not far off. When I got home, I took all our photos and burned them in the yard. The thick smoke caught the attention of the maid. She asked, "Mr. Wong, what are you burning? Do you need help?" I smiled faintly, but the smile quickly turned into tears. I turned away, a tear shining as it fell. Seeing that I didn't respond, the maid left, disappointed. Looking at the thick smoke, I realized that our past, just like those photos, would soon disappear into the air. In this world, there would be no trace of me or anything related to me, as if I had never existed at all. The suffocating feeling inside seemed to ease a little. By evening, when Anna returned, she brought a small box with her. She walked up behind me and hugged me tightly. Her cheek rested against my chest as she said, "Okay, you're not burning up anymore. David, yesterday really scared me. I called out to you many times, but you didn't respond. You know, I can't live without you." As she spoke, she tightened her embrace even more. "Can't live without me, huh?" I thought to myself. I looked down and saw a faint red mark on her neck. A wave of nausea hit me, and I pushed her arm away. But she coquettishly wrapped her arms around my neck again. Anna thought that it must have been because I was upset about not having her with me in the hospital while I was getting the 4. Her David had always had this kind of temper. She said, "They say nothing can't be solved by playing a game together. How about you see if you like this new gaming console?" I looked at the object in front of me, unsure whether it was a refurbished or counterfeit console, and sighed. Did she really know nothing about games? Noticing my displeasure, she reached up and touched my forehead. She asked, still feeling unwell, "Should I make you some porridge? Yesterday was my fault. I left you alone in the hospital. If you don't like this, what do you want? No matter how expensive or hard to get, I'll buy it for you." "I like it," I replied indifferently, but my face was anything but pleased. Upon hearing my response, Anna's worried heart finally relaxed, and she hugged me tightly. She said, "My David is the best." Anna went to the bathroom for a shower and noticed the delicate pill bottle on my desk. There was only one pill inside, and she instinctively picked it up and examined it closely. She asked, "David, is there anywhere you've been feeling unwell lately?" Chapter 3. I turned around and saw the pill in her hand. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly walked over to her, snatching the bottle from her hand and holding it tightly. I smiled at her and said, "It's nothing. It's just a sleep aid the doctor prescribed. It's quite expensive." Anna wrapped her arm around mine. She knew I often suffered from insomnia. She asked, "How expensive?" "If it's useful for your condition, I'll buy a whole box and keep it at home. That way, you can have it whenever you need it." I laughed and said, "Who keeps that much medicine on hand?" "All right, you go take a shower." While Anna went to the shower, I carefully hid the pill bottle. Later that night, when I opened my social media feed, I saw an update from Makoto. It read, "Someone's love, overflowing." The photo showed a pile of brand name watches, sunglasses, and shoes scattered on the floor. One comment said, "Wow, so many limited edition items." Makoto's pride seemed to almost burst through the screen as he replied, "Of course, the person who loves you will understand everything you need." Yes, the things I held in my hand, she really didn't understand them. The window in the picture reflected a familiar figure. I couldn't mistake that figure, no matter what. Poor Anna. Running between the two of us, she should really be called a time management master. I shut off my phone, and a sharp pain shot through my chest. It hurt so badly I collapsed to my knees. When the heart aches, you really feel it. But thankfully, everything will soon be over. The next day was the anniversary gala of Sue's corporation. Every year, Anna would take me to attend, and this year was no different. She had prepared a stylish white custom-made suit for me. The fit made me stand taller, matching my current identity perfectly. I dressed up as usual, but I couldn't manage even the slightest smile on my face. Anna took my arm as we entered the grand hall of the venue. Reporters and the PR team began snapping photos. A stable marriage was Anna's best endorsement. The opening dance was always ours. For this dance, I had practiced with a teacher for a long time because I didn't want Anna to feel embarrassed. But unlike Makoto, who came from a family of dancers, before we could even finish, Makoto entered the dance floor with a female partner. His eyes full of pride, the soft music suddenly shifted to an energetic Latin tune. Makoto, in a black Latin dance outfit, led his partner, dressed in a red dress, onto the floor. His partner's sensual movements didn't take away any of his spotlight. Her hips swayed provocatively, causing people to feel their pulse race as they watched. In almost no time, he had stolen everyone's attention. Someone asked, "Who's this?" The CEO and her husband haven't even finished their opening dance. "And this guy's already here. Doesn't he fear for his job?" Another replied, "Oh, this is Miss Sue's special male best friend. Otherwise, you think who else would be this bold?" Someone else commented, "No wonder. He's here to provoke them." Whispers from the guests reached my ears. Anna thought she was hiding it well, but the whole company could see her embarrassing situation. Meanwhile, the flirtatious interaction between Makoto and his dance partner deeply provoked Anna. I couldn't help but glance at Anna. Her gaze was fixed on the hand that the female partner had placed on Makoto's waist. Several times, their faces almost touched, and the air between them was thick with tension. Her fingers, holding the wine glass, turned slightly pale. I knew she was jealous of another man. When the dance ended, Makoto politely thanked everyone. Anna put down her wine glass, turned to me, and said, "David, I need to mingle for a bit. Take care of yourself." I nodded, watching her hurry away. She walked straight to Makoto's side and gave him a glance. Makoto ignored her, Seeing him ignore her like that only fueled Anna's anger. She looked around, grabbed Makoto's arm, and stormed off. I decided to take a breath on the balcony to escape the suffocating atmosphere inside. But as I passed the lounge, I heard a familiar voice. It was Anna and Makoto. Chapter 4. Inside. The sounds of a man and woman mixed together, rising and falling. Anna said, "You're making such a big fuss. Aren't you just trying to make me jealous? I told you, don't you ever show up in front of me." Makoto's voice was filled with a breathless intensity, making one's heart race. He said, "Miss Sue, isn't it because I miss you so much? Does this trick still work on you? I want you to know what it feels like when you're in that person's arms. It will hurt 1,000 times more than you can imagine." Anna said, "Next time, don't do this." I bit my lip, clenched my fists, but my face burned, tears streaming down uncontrollably. My first instinct was to run away. I quickly walked to the balcony, breathing in the fresh air, trying to escape the suffocating feeling from what I had just witnessed. A loud bang echoed. At 10 p.m., fireworks erupted on time. Guests crowded around, taking photos of me and applauding. Everyone probably thought the tears on my face were from being moved. I was the husband of the admired female CEO. These fireworks in the sky were for me alone. But Anna was nowhere to be seen. Only I knew that she was in another man's arms, doing something no one could ever see. As the guests whispered, speculating about where Anna had gone, the music suddenly changed. All eyes moved to the dance floor. The spotlight shone on Anna. How difficult for her, to have just cheated and now had to play the devoted partner. The spotlight followed her, coming towards me. She lifted the hem of her dress and pulled my hand, placing a watch worth millions onto my wrist. She said, "David, thank you for being with me. We'll be together forever, until we grow old." But I clearly saw that a scarf was now wrapped around her neck, covering the marks of passion she had left behind. Nearby, a woman exclaimed, "Isn't that the one I saw at the auction the other day? There's only one in the world, and Miss Sue managed to get it." Miss Sue doesn't buy jewelry for herself, but she bought a watch for Mr. Wong. Guess that's the benefit of having a female CEO wife. What a lucky guy. Yes, truly lucky. As the banquet neared its end, I felt exhausted. I returned to the dressing room, only to find that Makoto had been waiting there for me. The door to the dressing room was wide open. When he saw me, Makoto smiled, crossing his arms over his chest. His Latin dance outfit had been torn apart, and his neck was covered in red marks, all evidence of how intense their encounter had been. He said, "I didn't expect you to be so patient, Mr. Wong. If it were anyone else, wouldn't they have already taken care of me for being with their wife?" Makoto mocked me, flaunting his triumph. He casually brushed his hand over his neck. On his wrist was a watch identical to the one I was wearing, gleaming with a sharp, blinding light. He whispered into my ear, "You're just a kept man. I thought Mr. Wong was charming and difficult to deal with, but now, it seems you're just an useless fool." Anna said, "If it weren't for the fact that you're an orphan, she would have divorced you long ago. And yet, you still cling to her." I held it all in, my clenched fists trembling with veins bulging, but the next moment, I lost control of my body. Everyone watched as I raised my fist and punched Makoto square in the nose. Chapter 5. I cried out inwardly, "George!" George's strike was too heavy, and Makoto was sent reeling, crashing into the nearby coffee table. The glass on the table shattered all over the floor, and just then, the door was pushed open, and a crowd of people poured in. I turned around and saw Anna standing at the door with a large group of guests and reporters, all having witnessed the scene. Anna shouted, "Makoto!" People around started murmuring. Mr. Wong usually looks so gentle, but when it comes to fighting, he really doesn't hold back. Look, the assistant's face is practically smashed. Anna rushed to Makoto's side, crouching down carefully to check his injuries. Makoto said, "Anna, help me. I think my nose is broken." Makoto's expression was full of pain, and Anna looked up at me. She asked, "David Wong, what do you think you're doing?" She had never called me by my full name before. Anna motioned for someone to help Makoto up, and as they passed by me, she whispered to him, "David, I barely recognize you anymore." She paused for a moment, then adjusted herself and continued, "I'll go handle this, and I'll have the driver take you home later." She was blaming me. She thought it was my fault. Was I not allowed to even teach a lesson to someone who was destroying my marriage? As the crowd gradually dispersed, I was left alone in the empty room, staring at the shattered glass on the floor. I heard George's voice in my mind. He said, "David, I'm sorry. I just couldn't hold back." I looked out the window, wanting to cry but finding that I could no longer shed tears. I shook my head and said, "It's not your fault, George. You did what I've always wanted to do, but I still care about her." Actually, Makoto was right. I am a coward. The driver stood at the door, cautiously asking, "Mr. Wong, Miss Sue asked me to take you home." I shook my head and said, "You can go back. I need some time alone." The driver nodded slightly and left. My phone screen lit up again, and it was another message from Makoto. Room 203 at Sacred Heart Hospital. Do you want to see the real her? I turned off my phone. I stood there, staring out at the stars. George couldn't help but speak up again. David, don't tell me you're still going. I replied. Why not go? I glanced at my phone, then called a taxi. Before I left, I had to find out how much more of this deception and disguise there really was. The city at night had lost its grandeur, and it was already late, with few people on the streets. Suddenly, a lightning bolt struck, and I shuddered. It was late autumn, and the weather had turned cold. Soon, the taxi stopped in front of Sacred Heart Hospital. Following the information left by Makoto, I walked to the hospital room. Peering through the slightly ajar door, I saw Anna's mother and sister sitting on either side of Makoto's hospital bed, holding his hand with concern. Mrs. Su said, Makoto, you need to be careful in the future. Next time, stay away from David. This time he hit you. Who knows what he'll do next? Anna's sister said, yeah, brother-in-law, I don't know if David did this on purpose. He has a condition, and he won't let you give my sister a child. Anna pushed her sister lightly and said, who are you calling brother-in-law? Your only brother-in-law is David. Her sister stood up, arguing back. I don't care. I can't just watch him ruin you. You've been married to him for so long and haven't had a single child. It must be his problem. Don't you know how much mom loves seeing other people's children? He's taking away a woman's right to be a mother. It's too much. Her sister was 5 years younger than Anna. When Anna and I first started dating, she would always tag along with us, and she would sweetly call me brother-in-law. Because of George, I always wished for a sibling, and I treated her like my little sister, always making sure she had the best food and drinks. I never imagined that a man like Makoto would make her willingly call him brother-in-law. I had thought that at least my mother-in-law and sister-in-law would be on my side. I did have health problems, but I wasn't infertile. Anna often went out for social events and drinking, and her body had already taken a toll. I was the one who went to get the test results, and it was Anna who couldn't conceive. To spare her from pain, I lied and told her that I was infertile. For all these years, the family had been pressuring us to have children. At first, Anna would say that she was afraid of the pain of childbirth, but later, she stopped saying anything, and I was the one who had to deal with it. Now, I was caught in the middle, unable to escape. Mrs. Su's voice interrupted my thoughts. She said, Makoto, here's this family heirloom jade pendant for you. When Anna gets pregnant, you won't need to worry about the house or car. This child will be the only heir of the Su family. My vision blurred as I watched her place the pendant into Makoto's hand. I remembered that pendant. During our wedding, my mother-in-law had held my hand and said, from now on, you're my son. When you have children, this pendant will be yours. It seemed I had already been discarded by them. Anna lowered her head behind them and didn't dare to speak. She was thinking that once she had a child with Makoto, she could just pay him off with some money and send him away. She'd say the child was David's, and that would resolve the conflict between David and her family. For all these years, the family had been pushing her to have children, but she couldn't bear to let David go through surgery. So, this was her solution. But what she didn't know was that the cost of this would be losing him forever. I didn't want to hear any more, so I turned and walked away, disappearing into the empty hallway of the hospital. Anna said, no matter what you all say, my husband will always be David. After speaking, Anna grabbed the bag beside the bed, preparing to go home. She felt uneasy. She had just left David alone at the hotel and hadn't properly explained herself to him. She had to come up with a plan. Mrs. Su and Anna's sister exchanged glances before turning back to Makoto and saying, don't listen to her. Once Anna is pregnant with your child, you two will be a real family. Yeah, we all see you as family now. Makoto smiled, his heart already bursting with happiness. He knew that a child could capture a woman's heart completely. Once the child was born, the mother would devote all her energy to the child, and at that point, he, as the biological father, would naturally enter the Su family. With a little more effort, he could get rid of David, and the Su group would be his for the taking. Chapter 6. I stumbled down the street, my mind foggy as the rain poured down, soaking me from head to toe. My clothes were already drenched, and I walked through the rain, trying to process everything I had just witnessed. But in my memories, my mother-in-law's family had always liked him. When we got married, knowing I was an orphan, my mother-in-law said, good boy, from now on, treat the Su family as your own. We will always be your family. I tried my best to be a good son-in-law and fulfill my duties as a brother-in-law, but now it seemed that Makoto had long replaced me, and they had known about his existence all along. Once I lost my value, I was no longer important to them, including to Anna. A red Ferrari sped by, splashing me with water. In the blur, I saw the familiar license plate 520ZH. I couldn't hold it in anymore and broke down, crying in the rain. The rainwater flowed down my cheeks as I asked, George, why? What did I do wrong? Why is everyone treating me like this? George was there, but didn't speak. He didn't know how to comfort me, but the sharp, gut-wrenching pain was something he could feel too. Anna's car turned around and stopped beside me. She hurriedly got out and tried to hold an umbrella over me. Seeing me sobbing in the rain, her heart shattered. Anna helped me up and asked, "David, what's wrong? Why are you sitting here in the rain? You're already not in the best health. If you get sick, what am I supposed to do?" The heavy rain washed over my face, and I struggled to open my eyes, looking at this woman in front of me. But how could she speak of love for him when she had already betrayed me? I didn't say a word. Then, she pulled me into her embrace. She said, "I know. I was too harsh earlier, wasn't I? I'm sorry. Will you forgive me?" Forgive her? It was impossible now. When we got home, Anna helped me into the bathroom, set aside my pajamas, and turned the temperature up, preparing the bathwater. I sat numbly on the toilet, and Anna knelt down carefully, brushing away my wet hair. She asked, "Hubby, is it because I sent the employee to the hospital that upset you?" I can explain. There were so many reporters and guests around. It was the best crisis management we could do. Otherwise, if you post the video of slapping the employee online tomorrow, it won't just cause trouble for the company, but for you too. The company doesn't matter. I'm worried you'll get harassed online. Anna smiled seductively and said, "David, how about I help you with your bath?" That snapped me out of my daze, and I shook my head, rejecting her offer. Anna thought I was just being contrary, and she said, "All right, I won't tease you anymore. Then you take a nice warm bath. I'll wait for you in bed." I closed the bathroom door and looked at myself in the mirror. I said, "George, I'm really tired." George still didn't speak, but the reflection in the mirror smiled. Though it was a little awkward, I knew that George, who was not good with words, was trying his best to comfort me. After cleaning up, I lay down on the bed. Anna affectionately curled up in my arms, her hands wandering around the back of my neck. I thought about the scenes in the lounge and felt a cold shiver run through me, a feeling of utter disgust creeping up in my chest and stomach. I pushed Anna away and said, "I'm tired." Anna stopped what she was doing and kissed my shoulder gently, saying, "Okay, I won't bother you anymore." She clung to my hand, her grip tightening, a feeling of unease growing inside her. She felt that I was drifting further and further away from her. Tomorrow was David's birthday. There was still time to make things right, but what she didn't know was that tomorrow was also the day I decided to leave. Chapter 7. Every year, my birthday banquet is held at a different venue in the city, and this year was no exception. Anna rented the largest garden venue, making this birthday celebration even grander and more extravagant than most weddings. Anna had gone early to supervise the venue setup, ensuring that nothing went wrong for the event. Before leaving, Anna hugged me and said, "Good husband, I've prepared the suit for you. It's in the cloakroom. The driver will come to pick you up. I can't wait to see how you look in it." I watched her leave, and the door was shut behind her with a heavy thud. I walked into the cloakroom and picked up the suit Anna had chosen for me. It was a haute couture suit from a famous designer. She had taken care of everything for me, like I was some kind of high-end collectible doll, never asking for my opinion. Back in the bedroom, I took out the red pill that Dr. Lou had given me. He had said, "As long as you swallow this pill, only one of you, either you or George, will survive." The doctor's words echoed in my mind as I held the pill in my hand. Sitting at the table, George appeared just in time. He said, "David, are you sure about this? If you take it, you'll never see Anna again." I smiled and said, "George, if only you had been the one born in my mother's womb, then I wouldn't have had to come to this world, wouldn't have met Anna, and wouldn't have gotten lost in love." George said, "But none of this is your fault. It's their problem." I was resolute. I looked at the reflection of George in the mirror and said, "If only you could let me touch you." George's expression was serious, but tears welled up in his eyes. He too felt the pain for me, his younger brother. He stroked his face and said, "Think carefully, David. If I take over your body, I won't let go of Anna so easily. You really won't give her another chance." I bitterly smiled. I had given Anna too many chances. Before I could open my mouth to refuse, Makoto's message popped up on my phone. It read, "David, as a birthday favor, let Anna spend 2 hours with you tonight. The rest of the time, she's mine." I said, "See, George, what's left for me to hold on to?" I put my phone away and without hesitation, opened the bottle and swallowed the pill. I felt myself growing more and more drowsy, my body growing limp as I collapsed onto the bed, sinking into a deep sleep. A single tear slid down the corner of my eye. Finally, I whispered, "Anna, I'll never see you again." While Anna was preparing for the surprise she had planned for my birthday at the venue, she was upstairs tangled with Makoto. She said, "David's starting to suspect things. You better lay low. If he finds out about you, you know what I've warned you about the consequences." Makoto's hand roamed over Anna. He said, If he were going to find out, he would have done so already. Anna, you still need to spend time with him tonight. I don't need much, just a little while, until the event starts. Makoto continued his advances, knowing that Anna couldn't resist when he behaved like this. After their chaotic moment, Anna went to the shower, and Makoto unlocked her phone, deleting the message she had sent to David. Anna asked, I heard a phone ring just now. Whose was it? Makoto replied, just a spam call. Anna smiled and said, here's a card for you. Go buy your favorite watch or luxury car. In Anna's eyes, Makoto was easy to appease. Money would solve everything. What she didn't know was that Makoto's appetite had already grown much larger, and this little reward no longer appealed to him. The evening banquet proceeded as planned, with all the guests arriving and preparations being made in an orderly fashion. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the surprise Anna had prepared for the night. Since every year she presented her husband with a jaw-dropping gift. Last year, she had given him an entire wine estate. As the clock struck 8, David was still nowhere to be seen at the entrance. Guests whispered amongst themselves, speculating whether it was part of the couple's game. Anna instructed her assistant to check if something had gone wrong. Just then, the roar of a motorcycle engine was heard at the entrance. George appeared at the gates of the banquet hall. He wasn't wearing the high-end suit Anna had prepared for him. Instead, he wore black pants, black marten boots, and a black leather jacket. When he removed his helmet, the entire crowd was shocked. This rebellious, wild version of George was in stark contrast to the gentlemanly David everyone knew. Anna had never seen this side of David, and neither had anyone else in the room. Someone muttered, "Is that Mr. Wang?" "Yes, I can't believe it, but this version of Mr. Wang is actually pretty handsome." Even the host rubbed their eyes, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. George smiled slightly and walked down the red carpet toward Anna. It was then that Anna finally saw it was indeed her husband, David. A smile returned to Anna's face. This version of David was different, but even more attractive than before. She said, "Darling, happy." Before she could finish the word birthday, there was a sharp crack as George raised his hand and slapped her across the face. Chapter 8. The crowd exchanged confused glances, unsure of what was going on. Anna was stunned by the slap. She had never been hit before, let alone in front of so many people, making her look this humiliated. This was something David, the gentle and refined David, would never do. She covered her face and trembled. "David, what are you doing? There are so many people watching." George smiled and pressed the button on the remote control in his hand. In an instant, everyone's attention shifted to the giant screen, and the room erupted in shock. On the screen were explicit images of Anna and Makoto in a private office booth. The crowd gasped in shock, some covering their mouths, some too embarrassed to look, while others with ill intentions began recording with their phones, only to have the security guard confiscate them. George scanned the room and spotted Makoto, dressed in a sharp suit, standing among the crowd. He was equally shocked by the footage on the screen. With the microphone in his hand, George addressed Makoto. "Mr. Ito, care to explain, how did you end up in bed with your boss?" The crowd followed George's gaze and discovered Makoto in the crowd. Some people, unable to contain their anger, shouted, "So the man who destroys others' relationships is here, huh? Just look at him, you can tell he's no good. Anna's really shameless, bringing her lover to her husband's birthday banquet." George walked through the crowd and grabbed Makoto by the collar, dragging him in front of Anna. Makoto didn't dare to breathe, collapsing to his knees on the floor in humiliation. Another punch landed, and this time George put all his strength into it. He had been wanting to hit this man for so long. Every time Makoto had provoked David, every time he took advantage of David's gentle and passive nature, George had been holding back. The crowd cheered, some even clapping and shouting, "Beat him to death, people like him deserve it. Mr. Wang, we support you." Anna's assistant screamed, "Shut it down. Where's the manager? Shut it down." George looked at Anna, her face alternating between shades of green and white, and it only made him feel more satisfied. "Anna, our game is just beginning." Makoto covered his face, sitting on the floor, too scared to even speak, but Anna seemed not to notice. She pulled on George's arm and said, "Darling, let me explain." George naturally had no intention of listening to her. He shoved all the evidence and the divorce papers into her hands and sternly said, "Sign it." Anna carefully flipped through the papers George had handed her, and the words "divorce agreement" gleamed brightly on the document. In an instant, she tore the papers into pieces. "David, I was wrong. I don't want a divorce." George smiled, a bright, radiant smile. "It's fine if you don't sign. We can go through the legal process." With that, he turned and walked away with elegance. By the time Anna rushed out, trailing her dress behind her, George was already speeding off on his motorcycle. The events of that day quickly became the talk of the upper circles. Over tea and meals, Anna's face had been completely ruined. Sioux Corporation's stock price plummeted. hitting the limit down for several days in a row. The board of directors was in an uproar, and several business partners called to cancel their collaborations. The image of Anna's perfect family crumbled in an instant. Makoto also became the target of everyone's wrath. 4 days. He barely dared to step outside. Someone found his home address and splashed red paint on his door, cursing him for destroying a relationship and wishing him an early death. He also received bloody dolls in the mail. Every day, he lived in fear. Anna couldn't understand why David's transformation was so drastic. She didn't realize that the soul that had once deeply loved her had already been replaced. It wasn't until a lawyer contacted her, informing her that David had already filed for divorce, that Anna finally grasped the severity of the situation. Anna returned home, hoping to confront David and get some answers. In her mind, David, even if he knew about her affair, would never retaliate in such an extreme way. He had always been a gentle, considerate man. When had he ever spoken so harshly? But no matter how much she searched, there was no trace of David anywhere in the villa. She called the maid, only to find the scarf she had bought for David in Italy last year hanging around the maid's neck. Chapter 9. Anna asked, "Where's Mr. David? And what's with the scarf around your neck?" The maid hesitated, nervously removing the scarf from her neck. She said, "A few days ago, I saw Mr. David burning photographs in the yard. Yesterday, he gave me this scarf and said he no longer needed it. We all received gifts from him," he said. "What did he say?" Anna's hand clenched tightly. So David had already prepared to leave. Was he just waiting for this day? The maid continued. "He said that we'd worked hard recently and that this was a reward for us." Anna asked, "Why didn't you report such odd behavior earlier?" The maid mumbled, "Well, you haven't really been staying here much lately." It was true that Anna had barely been home recently. Since she started trying to conceive with Makoto, she had used all sorts of excuses to convince David, and every time, he had agreed without hesitation. It seemed that, at that time, David had already been preparing his revenge. The feeling of suffocating frustration washed over Anna, as if it might drown her. She searched through their bedroom, but there was hardly a trace of David left behind, not even a single hair. David truly didn't want her anymore. Moreover, because of the events a few days ago, her phone was about to explode from all the incoming calls. Her assistant called to report, "Miss Sue, I've had the video removed from all platforms." But, before the assistant could finish, Anna could no longer contain her anger. She shouted, "No matter what you do, I don't want to hear or see anything about that video again. And, what's the PR and legal departments doing? If they can't handle this, you can all pack up and leave." Anna slammed her phone down, shattering it into pieces. Losing face in public was nothing compared to losing David. That was something she couldn't accept. That night, George kicked open the door of Dr. Lou's clinic. He shouted, "Why did you give David that drug? Is it because you wanted him dead, that he'll never wake up again?" The doctor's name was Willow. She had known George would come, and today's visit didn't surprise her. In fact, she had been expecting him. She simply watched George, the man she had fallen in love with. Was it wrong to love a person with such a troubled past? Watching David suffer endlessly, she chose to help George wake up, to help everyone, even if it meant crossing lines. Was that wrong? George grabbed Willow's arm, his eyes wide with fury. "I'm asking you, answer me." Willow adjusted her glasses, and with calm poise, she grabbed his hand. She said, "Wasn't David suffering? Don't you want to live once, just for yourself?" George was momentarily stunned by this question. He had once thought about it. If only he could control the body entirely, not having to share it with someone else. But he cared for David too much. If his resurrection meant David's death, he wasn't willing to make that sacrifice. Willow stood on tiptoe, pulling him closer by his collar and kissed him deeply. Her kiss was intense, aggressive, as if she had been waiting for this moment for too long. To his own surprise, George didn't pull away. He understood that he had feelings for Willow too. After all, he couldn't hide his affections in front of a psychologist. George sold all the luxury items Anna had given to David and bought one of the most expensive apartments in the city, a spacious flat. He furnished it according to David's tastes, adding plenty of furniture, and even went to a pet store to pick out an orange kitten, naming it Big Orange. Sitting on the sofa, George smiled slightly as he checked the data on his iPad. He was keeping an eye on the public opinion surrounding Sue Corporation and Makoto. No matter what kind of response the PR team came up with, he had his own tricks up his sleeve to release even more explosive information. Willow sat in the living room, watching George concentrate on his work. She knew that this peaceful time wouldn't last long, so she treasured every moment she spent with him. The recent negative press had thrown Sue Corporation into an unprecedented crisis. "Miss Sue, we couldn't find any entry or exit records for Mr. Wong. However, we found a lot of purchase records." Chapter 10. Anna's eyes suddenly lit up. She asked, "What did he buy?" The assistant replied, "Not just buying, but also selling. Mr. Wang has disposed of many of the gifts you previously gave him. Almost all of them were sold online. With the money, he's bought several properties, residential ones, as well as commercial spaces. Anna thought to herself, this didn't seem like something David would do. In her impression, David had always been indifferent to material things and had no desire for money. No matter how expensive the luxury goods, they never won his favor. Sometimes, even a bowl of porridge she personally made for him made him happier. But why was he doing this now? Why had he changed? She said. Find a private investigator. Keep digging. Be careful not to expose ourselves. Yes. As if a thought had crossed her mind, Anna quickly drove back home. She rushed into the bedroom, looking for the pill bottle she had seen earlier. Her instinct told her that pill was not ordinary, but when she searched the room, she couldn't find the bottle that contained the pill. She shouted, "Housekeeper!" The housekeeper responded. "What's wrong, ma'am?" she asked. "When you were cleaning, did you notice any medicine on Mr. David's nightstand? A transparent bottle with only one red pill inside." The housekeeper thought carefully, and after a moment, she said, "Yes, that was the medicine given to Mr. David after his visit to the psychologist." Anna asked, "Psychologist?" "Yes, Mr. David had frequent insomnia. After seeing the doctor, they said it could be a psychological issue. He started going to a psychologist, and the doctor said he was suffering from anxiety and depression and needed to take medication regularly. But the little exquisite bottle, that was the first time I've seen it. David was depressed. She had never known, or maybe, she had never cared enough to find out. For a whole year, David had struggled with insomnia, and she hadn't noticed. She only knew he had trouble sleeping. Every time she woke up at night, she'd find David sitting by her side. She thought it was just because he had shallow sleep and never considered the deeper issue. Could this be the reason for his drastic change in behavior? She asked, "Do you have the address for the psychologist?" The housekeeper thought for a moment, but she didn't know. Every time, David would tell the driver the address. She said, "The driver knows. Mr. David always tells him the address." Before the housekeeper could finish, Anna was already running out the door, finding the driver, and getting in the car. She said, "Take me to the psychologist Mr. David usually goes to." Meanwhile, George wasn't giving up. He followed Willow to the clinic. He said, "Bring David back to life. Do you hear me?" George slammed his palm on the table. Willow, looking at the documents in her hand, didn't seem moved at all. She had spent so much effort to bring George back. How could she give up now? George said, "If you can bring me back to life, you can bring David back as well. I'm willing to give this body back to him. It was his to begin with." Willow didn't even look at him. She just said, "Every time you call for him in your mind, has he ever responded?" George froze. He hadn't, before. Whenever either George or David called out to the other in their minds, there had always been a response. They could talk to each other in their heads, feel each other's emotions, and even the pain. But now, he hadn't felt even a hint of something that wasn't his own for a long time. It felt as though he had always lived in this body, and David had never existed at all. Willow smiled gently, raising her eyes to look at George. She said, "The decision was David's. I didn't force him. He didn't want to live anymore." Then, Willow walked over to George and hugged him tightly. She said, "I wish you could take his place and live on well. When he came to see me, his depression was already very severe. Letting him go may have been a relief for him." Willow wiped the tear from George's eye, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him on tiptoe. At that moment, the door was suddenly flung open, and Anna's furious shout echoed in their ears. "What are you doing?" Anna's gaze was like a sharp knife, as though she was about to pierce through them both. Her teeth gritted, and her body trembled slightly, as if she was desperately holding back the storm of emotions inside her. Anger and jealousy intertwined in her heart. All the pent-up emotions from the past few days seemed to have found an outlet, ready to explode at any moment. Before George and Willow could react, Anna had already lunged at Willow, grabbing her by the collar and pulling her hair, slapping her again and again. Willow endured the slaps in pain. Anna was like a wild animal, pressing Willow to the ground, her face scratched with numerous marks. Willow's hair was in disarray, and the next moment, George grabbed Anna by her clothes, yanked her off Willow, and then slapped her hard across the face. Anna's eyes were filled with rage as she looked at George in disbelief. She stopped and stared at him, her eyes wide with shock, as if she couldn't comprehend what had just happened. With a wounded voice, she said, "For another woman, you actually hit me." George said, "You couldn't stand seeing us kiss, but did you ever think about how I felt when you were having an affair with Makoto?" Anna's gaze darkened, but the remaining sliver of reason still clung to George's arm. She said, "I haven't signed the divorce agreement yet. I'm still your wife." George didn't look at her. He shoved her away and bent down to help Willow. He said, "When you were with Makoto, you didn't remember I was your husband. Now, I'm making space for you. Shouldn't you thank me? Watching George gently wipe the blood from Willow's face, Anna's fury surged to its peak. She shouted, "David." George turned to look at her, his expression devoid of any emotion. Willow groaned softly, and George carefully checked her injuries. Anna could clearly see the worry in George's eyes, the same kind of concern he used to show only for her. She couldn't bear it any longer and wanted to pull George back to her side. George forcefully shook off her arm. As he took out his phone and dialed the police, he said, "Hello, I'd like to report a disturbance. There's someone causing trouble here." Anna had never imagined that David would ever call the police on her. A strong sense of losing control overwhelmed her, and it felt like she was really going to lose David. She said, "David, I was wrong. I was temporarily out of my mind. What do you want me to do for you to forgive me?" The high and mighty Anna finally lowered her stance, almost begging. George gave a bitter smile. Would David feel better seeing her like this? Then, he composed himself and looked at her coldly. He said, "If I told you to die, would you die?" Seeing that Anna didn't respond, George helped Willow up. He said slowly, "Anna, in my heart, you are nothing." Chapter 11. The police arrived quickly, and everyone was taken to the station. Soon after, Sue's mother, accompanied by Makoto, rushed in. "My daughter, Anna." Sue's mother saw George sitting in a chair and immediately walked over to him, raising her hand as if to slap him. But before she could do so, George grabbed her hand midair and forcefully threw it aside. Sue's mother froze for a moment, then angrily cursed. "It's all your fault. You actually sent Anna to the police station. You have a heart of stone." George didn't want to engage with her. His eyes cold and sharp, he gritted his teeth and said, "Say one more word, and don't blame me for being rude." Sue's mother was frightened by this version of David. She had never seen him like this before. In her eyes, David had always been the polite, well-mannered gentleman, some would say spineless, easy to manipulate. But what was going on today? Makoto, standing nearby, began his own green tea routine. He said, "David, if you have a problem, you should take it out on me. After all, Anna is your wife, and spreading this news won't do any of us any good." Only then did George notice there was another person there. He smiled and said, "So you still remember she's my wife? Did you ever think about how it would affect her reputation when you slept with my wife?" The entire police station fell into an eerie silence. If it weren't for the circumstances, George would have liked to throw another punch. Makoto took a couple of steps back, no longer speaking. Sue's mother immediately stepped forward and said, "Anna has been married to you for so many years, wasting her best years on you. You're incompetent, and she even lost the right to be a mother because of you. Think about it. Where did you go wrong?" The police officer, who had been listening to this, couldn't take it anymore. He said, "Enough. This is a police station, not a place for your tantrums. If you want to argue, go home and do it. Here's the deal. If you settle, sign the papers here, and you can take your people home. If not, you'll be detained for 7 to 15 days. It's up to you." George slightly raised the corner of his mouth and glanced at the two of them. Sue's mother and Makoto's faces had darkened. All the angry words they had thrown out earlier now seemed like slaps across their faces. Sue's mother wanted to step forward to reason with them, but she couldn't even get a word out. Anna glanced at George. Since he had already called the police, it wasn't impossible that she could be locked up now. She called, "David." Her gaze held a trace of pleading. She had never been so low before in her life. George helped Willow, who was sitting beside him, to her feet and said, "You're the one who's injured. It's your call." Willow didn't hesitate and told the police, "No settlement." George smiled, confirming his inner decision. He gently brushed Willow's cheek and asked, "Does it still hurt?" This scene deeply pierced Anna's heart. Her David really didn't want her anymore. He could be so cold and indifferent, even sending her to jail. Makoto suddenly knelt in front of George, pleading, "David, please, let Anna go. Anna only did this because it's for the good of both of you." George smiled and said, "Cut the moral high ground. If you really feel sorry, you can go in and keep her company." After saying that, George supported Willow and left without looking back. Chapter 12. George brought Willow home and carefully applied medicine to her wounds with a cotton swab. He said, "I remember you practiced women's martial arts before. Anna isn't a match for you." Willow smiled, but the wound cracked slightly, causing her to bite her lip in pain. She said, "How did you know I practiced that?" George replied, "I saw it on your office bookshelf." George was actually very smart, more rational than David, and had a sharp memory. Willow looked at George like this, and she couldn't help but be moved by him again and again. Willow lowered her eyes, not daring to look at him, and said, "After all, I lost someone else's husband. There's still guilt in my heart. Besides, if I didn't get hurt, how would I know someone cares this much about me?" George pinched Willow's cheek and said, "You little green tea." Willow was still a bit worried about George's safety. She said, "Anna's emotions are out of control right now. You'd better stay away from her." George's expression didn't change, but the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He said, "Don't worry. Her mind is probably not on me right now." Anna would soon receive the package that George had sent. It was packed full of evidence of her affair with Makoto, including texts, photos, and videos of Makoto provoking David. George had spent the entire night organizing it. Every time he looked at those things, his heart would still ache. It wasn't jealousy, but hatred. Hatred for the grievances David had suffered and had nowhere to vent. Hatred for Anna's heartlessness. 7 days later, Anna's hands trembled as she opened the package. She had once thought she was hiding things very well, secretly flirting with Makoto under David's nose. She had been obsessed with the thrill it brought, but never imagined she would lose David because of it. She crumpled the paper into a ball. It turned out that Makoto had been provoking David a long time ago, trying every means to irritate him. David's depression had everything to do with him. She had warned Makoto. Anna drove to Makoto's place. She had her subordinates kick open the door and, under her direction, they grabbed Makoto by the neck and slammed him against the wall. Makoto's face turned red from the pressure on his neck. He struggled to say, "Anna, what are you?" Anna's eyes were filled with overwhelming rage. She shouted, "Didn't I tell you? Don't let David know about our relationship. You sent him so many provocative messages in private. Who gave you the guts to do that? Makoto, you're looking to die." Makoto was nearly suffocated, repeatedly hitting the bodyguard's arm in desperation. Anna signaled for her subordinate to release him. Makoto weakly slid down the wall to the ground, coughing uncontrollably, tears and snot flowing from his face. He looked up at Anna with tear-filled eyes. He said, "Anna, when a person truly loves someone, they want to possess them. I'm no different. David isn't all that great. Don't forget, he's the one who called the police and had you arrested. We could have lived happily together, the three of us." Makoto's cries became more intense, and he collapsed on the ground in despair. Anna looked at him coldly and said, "I've always been David's alone. What are you? How dare you compare yourself to him?" Anna took 2 steps back, closed her eyes, and said, "You better behave yourself. If I find out you go after David again, don't blame the Sue family for not being kind. I always mean what I say." Chapter 13. Anna returned to the empty house. She dismissed all the servants and locked herself in the bedroom, drinking bottle after bottle of wine. Her memories were filled with images of the happy times with David. She could never understand why David could be so heartless. Suddenly, the scene of David kissing Willow flashed in her mind. Her hand was on David's neck, and he looked at her with so much love in his eyes. The floor was littered with empty wine bottles. When her assistant came to report on work, he found her lying among the bottles, her body covered in red wine and vomit. When she woke up in the hospital, the assistant approached and said, "Miss Sue, the doctor said you can't keep drinking like this." Anna stared at the ceiling, feeling like life had lost all meaning. She said, "Tell me, is there any progress in the investigation?" The assistant sighed, holding a folder as he continued, "We found Mr. Sue's place. It's an apartment in the Shallow Bay area." Without thinking, Anna got out of bed and didn't even bother to change clothes. She said, "Take me to him." The assistant helped her up, knowing he couldn't stop her. Anna closed her eyes in the car. Her face was as pale as death, and waves of spasms in her stomach made her furrow her brow. The assistant looked at her through the rearview mirror and sighed deeply. He had watched their relationship unfold, and when Anna was with Makoto, he knew it would eventually blow up. He had expected this day, but he couldn't stop it. When they reached the building, Anna saw from the floor-to-ceiling window that Willow was hugging David's neck. They looked very sweet together. Anna could no longer hold back and rushed upstairs, banging on the door. She shouted, "David, come out. We're not even divorced, and you're already flirting with someone else." George and Willow, who were inside, were startled by the sudden shout. Willow walked over, opened the door, and said, "Miss Sue, still nostalgic for your time in detention?" Anna stepped forward and grabbed Willow's sleeve tightly. She demanded, "Do you know he's a married man?" But Willow swiftly countered, pinning Anna to the wall with a skilled move. She said, "So what if I know? What if I don't? Before you criticize others, maybe you should take a look in the mirror and think about the disgusting things you've done yourself." Willow released Anna's hand, but Anna fell heavily to the ground. George walked up to her, placing the divorce papers beside her. He said, "You came at the right time. Sign it." Anna no longer had the strength to stand. She turned her head and said with a cold tone, "No way. David, I don't believe you've already fallen for someone else so quickly." George pulled Anna up forcefully, staring into her eyes and saying, "Anna, I don't love you anymore. If you still care about the past, sign it." Anna, unwilling to lose David, tried to salvage things. She called her assistant and said, "Transfer all my properties, stocks, and cash to David's name." After hanging up the phone, she looked at the men in front of her with hope. She said, "I'm giving you everything I have. Let's not get divorced, please. Give me a chance to change. Let's start over." She had no choice now. She would do whatever David wanted, except divorce him. George smiled at Anna and said, "Not possible. I will never forgive you in this lifetime." In his mind, he thought, "David, Anna is begging for your forgiveness. Do you see it?" When the security guards escorted Anna out, heavy rain suddenly began pouring down outside. Anna stood under George's building, unwilling to leave. George and Willow stood by the windowsill, watching Anna getting soaked in the rain. George said, "David also broke down in such heavy rain before. She should taste this feeling." That day, David had kneeled in the rain, asking George what he had done wrong for Anna to treat him this way. How he wished he could hug his brother and tell him that he did nothing wrong, that Anna was the one who was wrong and she would get her comeuppance. Now, George had made it happen, but compared to the pain David had suffered, this was far from enough. Downstairs, Anna stood in the rain, as if the downpour could wash away the pain in her heart. Soon, the sound of raindrops hitting her head turned into the sound of rain hitting an umbrella. She thought David had finally softened and was willing to forgive her, but when she looked up, it was Willow who was holding the umbrella. Her face still had the marks from the scratches Anna had given her 2 days ago. Willow said, "Miss Sue, does torturing yourself help?" Anna glared at Willow, her eyes full of anger and a touch of jealousy. Anna replied, "This is between me and David. It's none of your business." Willow ignored her and spoke on. "The first time David came to find me, he was very sick." She was talking about David. She continued, "By then, his physical decline was very obvious. He couldn't sleep, was emotionally down, had headaches, numbness in his limbs, tinnitus, slurred speech, and many other symptoms. Didn't you notice?" Anna froze for a moment. David had always been quiet, and she had never paid attention, or rather, her mind was never on him. She only thought about earning a lot of money for her husband to spend. Willow said, "He often showed signs of suicidal thoughts." Anna's hand tightened slightly, her nails digging into her palm as if doing so could alleviate the numb, dull pain coming from her heart. Willow said no more, but handed her the umbrella. Anna wondered if David, who had always been by her side, had really suffered so much. The images of David and Willow tangled up kept replaying in Anna's mind, until she saw the lights upstairs go out. Anna couldn't bear it anymore and collapsed in the rain. "David, were you in this much pain before?" George looked at the transfer and agreement sent by the assistant, his lips curling into a smile. Things were progressing just as he expected. Everything was going smoothly. The next day, there was no trace of Anna downstairs. She had been taken away in an ambulance, but George didn't care. What mattered now was getting revenge on David. Anna's properties were all transferred to David's name, including the apartment Makoto was currently living in. George brought a group of workers to Makoto's place. He gestured to the locksmith behind him, and the locksmith quickly opened the door. Makoto saw the people entering and a flash of panic crossed his face. He shouted, "David, how did you know this place?" George walked into the living room, surveyed the room, and sat down on the couch. He said, "I'm here to reclaim my property. Is there a problem?" Chapter 14. Makoto said, "What do you mean? Your house? This was bought for me by Anna." Makoto, in disbelief, took out his phone to call Anna, but the call was never answered. He paced back and forth in the living room, calling again and again. George looked at Makoto's actions and sneered. "Looks like your Anna doesn't care about you anymore." Makoto didn't stop calling. His phone kept ringing. George made a shoo sound, took out his phone, and said, "How about I help you call?" He then dialed Anna's number and put the call on speaker. Almost instantly, Anna answered. She said, "David, you're finally willing to contact me." Makoto's face turned pale, while George handed the phone to him. Makoto said, "Anna, Mr. Wang and a bunch of people broke in and are trying to kick me out. Please, come quickly." There was a brief silence on the other end of the phone. Anna spoke up, extinguishing all of Makoto's hopes. She said, "He's right." Makoto shouted, "Anna, you can't treat me like this." George raised an eyebrow and smiled as he took the phone from Makoto's hand. Anna said, "David." She wanted to say more, but George coldly hung up the call and turned to face Makoto. George said, "Are you done now?" Makoto's eyes were red. He spat out, "David, don't think you're something special. You're nothing but an unwanted orphan. Without Anna, you're nothing." George ignored him and motioned for the workers to start. He said, "I don't want anything from here. Everything gets moved out." The workers, as swift as ancient soldiers looting a house, began moving the furniture. Makoto shouted, "There's a lot of stuff here that's mine. You can't take it." George walked over to him and lit a cigarette. He said, "Your things. Tell me, which one of your things wasn't bought with Anna's money?" Even the clothes you're wearing. I demand you take them off and crawl out of this house. Otherwise, I don't mind sending you back to stay in detention for a few more days." Makoto wisely shut his mouth and stopped talking. When the room was almost emptied, Sue's mother and sister arrived. Makoto, seeing them like a savior, rushed to their side. Sue's mother glanced at George and looked like she was about to act, but George's harsh glare extinguished her courage. Sue's mother said, "David, this house was bought for Makoto by Anna. You don't have the right to kick him out." George slapped the transfer agreement on Sue's mother's face. He smiled and said, "Take a good look. The owner of this house now is me. I have the right to deal with everything in this house." Sue's mother, seething with anger, could barely control herself. She gritted her teeth and said, "Do you have any manners? I'm your elder. How dare you speak to your elder like this?" George chuckled. "Elder? Once I divorce Anna, what kind of elder do you think you are?" Unable to win against George, Sue's mother pulled Makoto's hand and said, Let's go. We can't afford to fight, but we can avoid it." Sue's sister also said, "Right, brother-in-law. Let's go back to the villa. We won't leave you homeless." George called out to stop them. He said, "By the way, that villa you're staying in is now mine too. Since you have so much stuff, I'll give you 3 days to move out." Sue's mother, shocked, turned around and asked, "What, did Anna give that villa to you as well?" George smiled and said, "To be precise, all the properties, cars, and stocks under her name are mine now. She cheated in the marriage and left empty-handed. I think it's completely reasonable for me to take all of these." When Sue's mother heard this, her blood boiled with rage. She was about to march forward when Sue's sister stopped her. She said, "Mom, let's go back and think of a plan." Sue's mother seemed to finally come to her senses and said, Yes. Makoto, don't worry with us, mother and daughter. We've got this." Before leaving, she couldn't resist throwing one last threat. "David, you'd better not get too cocky. I'll have Anna come over to deal with you." George watched as the three of them disappeared, and he couldn't help but remember how David had truly treated them like family. Now it seemed that they were completely unworthy of it. Chapter 15. In the following days, Anna didn't bother him, and George felt at ease for the first time in a long while. He had already calculated everything in his mind. His plan was to get David back with Willow's help, no matter the cost or the sacrifices it would require. Everything he was doing now was to pave the way for his future life. George bought 2 shops, one for himself, turning it into a gallery, and the other to rent out. Even if David wanted to take a step back in the future, he would still have some income. The gallery was decorated by both George and Willow, with almost every piece reflecting David's favorite style. George looked at David's paintings hanging on the walls, feeling a sense of satisfaction. The sunlight poured onto the artworks, giving them a soft golden glow, and it felt so soothing. Whenever Willow had free time, she would come to keep him company. They cherished every moment together, savoring every second. George got his driver's license and bought David a car for commuting. It wasn't very expensive, but its safety features were top-notch. In the past, David had mentioned to Anna that he wanted to learn how to drive and get a license, but Anna had refused. She thought driving was dangerous. If David needed to go somewhere, she would arrange for a driver. It seemed caring, but in truth, it was a form of control. David, concerned about Anna's feelings, chose to be the obedient husband, following her every arrangement. Over time, he lost a sense of self, but what he didn't know was that it was the steering wheel in his own hands that made him feel secure. George carefully selected a 1,000-paper crane pendant, one that he had sewn himself, with a peace charm inside that he had prayed for David. He gently hung it in the car, hoping it would keep him safe. Anna, on the other hand, had been quiet for a while. He had heard that she spent a long time in the hospital, several times in the intensive care unit. When he saw her again, it was at the law firm where they were finalizing their divorce. Anna still had the same sharp, strong woman image, but she looked so worn out that George barely recognized the vibrant person she used to be. The lawyer handed them the documents, informing them that the divorce procedure was complete, and the assets had been divided. Now, all that was left was for them to sign, and the divorce would be finalized. Anna had actually started to suspect George a long time ago. She had hired a private investigator to look into things. This man, sitting in front of her, had the same face as David, but nothing else was the same. She remembered David had once told her that he had a twin brother who died in the womb, but now, as they sat to finalize their divorce, it all seemed to confirm her suspicions. Could it be that David's twin brother had survived and was now pretending to be David, stealing his wealth? If so, where was the real David? In the meeting room, Anna and George sat on opposite sides of the table, each with their own thoughts. The lawyer placed the documents in front of them and said, "All that's left is for both of you to sign the divorce agreement, and the marriage will be dissolved." George swiftly signed the documents, but Anna remained motionless. George looked at her carefully and said, "Anna, There's no chance for us anymore, no matter what you do now. I won't turn back. Let it go. Anna, with a faint expression, leaned back in her chair, staring at George without moving. She said, "You're not David." Chapter 16. George put down the pen in his hand, leaning back in his chair with an air of calm, smiling at Anna. Even if there was doubt, he was confident she could never find any evidence. George said, "Anna, stop making excuses. It's pointless. Our marriage is over. You can't change that." Anna didn't respond to his words but coldly asked, "Tell me, where have you hidden David? No matter what conditions you offer, I'll agree to them." She couldn't believe that the men before her, so aggressive and ruthless, could possibly be the same gentle and kind David she had known. She didn't believe that anyone could change so drastically overnight. George asked, "What do you want me to say? Prove that I am who I am." Anna stood firm, saying, "I don't believe David would do this to me, and I won't divorce him. No matter how much you cover it up, I will find the evidence to expose your true face." With that, Anna stood up and left. George wiped the smile off his face and chased after her. He grabbed her arm and forced her to face him. He said, 14 years ago, in that winter, I first met you. I told you that you were the most special girl I had ever met. The first gift you gave me was a little bear from the amusement park. You had saved up for half a year just to buy it for my birthday. You said you liked to nibble on my cheek, calling it a physiological affection. You said you wanted to build a warm home with me. You even said you would give me 2 children, one boy who looked like me, called Wang Chenchen, and one girl who looked like you, called Wang Tian Tian. Each word nailed Anna in place, unable to move. Those shared memories, the promises they made, were like sharp knives cutting into her heart. The person she had vowed to cherish for a lifetime was standing right in front of her. Anna's eyes turned red, and she stared blankly at the familiar yet unfamiliar men before her. A tear fell from her chin and dropped to the ground. She already knew the truth in her heart, but she refused to accept it. The men standing before her couldn't possibly be her David. She racked her brain trying to find a way to argue. She said, "These words don't prove you're David. Maybe he told you about us. Don't waste your efforts." With that, she shoved George away and walked out. Anna. George hadn't expected her to suddenly change her mind and refuse to sign the papers. Her actions had completely thrown off his plans. At the Twilight Bar, George drank one glass after another. Willow said, "All right, George, so we haven't finalized the divorce. We'll think of another way." Willow snatched the glass from George's hand. She patted his back comfortingly, knowing he was doing everything to pave the way for David's safety. As long as the divorce wasn't finalized, he couldn't be sure that David was safe. At a nearby booth, a pair of eyes were fixed on them. Anna clenched her fists tightly, then drank from her glass. She was sure now, he wasn't David. David was allergic to alcohol. As soon as he touched it, his body would react with hives. And once he ate a piece of liquor-filled chocolate. Anna had spent 3 days at the hospital with him, getting injections. But this man before her showed no such reaction. She kept rubbing her palms, trying to calm the numbness caused by the overwhelming tension. If he wasn't David, then where was her David? Anna signaled to her assistant. Just as George and Willow left the bar, they were dragged into a van. George, already drunk, couldn't keep his balance, and Willow was knocked unconscious and thrown into the back seat. When they woke up again, they found themselves in a secluded warehouse. George's mouth was stuffed with cloth, and he couldn't speak. Willow's hands were tied to a beam, and she was badly injured. Looking around, Anna was sitting in the corner, eyes closed, resting, awake. George met Anna's cold, deep eyes. He cursed and yelled, but his words turned into weak growls. Anna walked over and lifted his head, saying, "Feeling pain now? You know, when I saw David like this, I felt pain too." Anna removed the cloth from George's mouth. George yelled, "Anna, you're crazy. Do you know this is kidnapping?" Her grip tightened, and George could feel her trembling. Anna snorted and said, "I'm crazy. How could I not be crazy without David? Tell me, where is my David? Where have you hidden him?" George had never seen Anna so enraged. Her anger was like a raging fire, threatening to consume him. He had underestimated her madness, but if she weren't mad, how could she have built the Sioux family in just a few years? But he wasn't afraid. George sneered and asked, "You want to find David?" Anna's eyes were filled with hope. She was right, this man wasn't David. But the next moment, George's words shattered her completely. He said, "David is dead. He died when you cheated on him, betrayed him, and lied to him. You claimed to love him while seeking other men. You even talked about having children with another man. Do you understand how he felt?" "I do. I felt that pain deeply, the suffocating pain. In those nights when you were tangled with Makoto." He cried alone, licking his wounds. "Where were you then?" Anna shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes before sliding down her face. George scoffed. "Now you're pretending to be heartbroken for whom?" "Miss Sue." Are you satisfied now? You killed David with your own hands. George's heart hurt too. He was more devastated by David's death than Anna was. Anna seemed to go crazy, shaking her head and muttering that it couldn't be true. She said, David loved me so much. How could he abandon me? No, David didn't die. You two must have hidden him. Anna grabbed George's neck and asked, where is he? George's face turned red as Anna squeezed harder, but Willow spoke up. Let him go. I'll tell you where he is. Anna paused and relaxed her grip a little, remembering that there was still someone else behind her. George coughed repeatedly. He said, Willow, you can't say anything. Willow lifted her eyes, her gaze filled with unspeakable sorrow. She said, Anna, have you heard of dissociative identity disorder? Anna turned and looked at Willow, asking, what do you mean? Right now, the person in front of you is David, but in this body, there's another soul, George's. When David came to me because of insomnia, I discovered that in his subconscious, there were two distinct personalities. The brothers were close, and when he was with you, his twin brother never appeared. But recently, he came to me asking for help to disappear, to give the body back to his brother. So, he is George, not David. David's soul is already dead. Chapter 17. Anna laughed out loud, not believing what Willow had just said, but it seemed like this was the only explanation that could make everything fit together. She asked, if it's one body, then why is David allergic to alcohol? But he's fine. Willow coughed twice and said, let me down, and I'll tell you. Anna hesitated for a moment but decided to follow Willow's request. She couldn't help it. She had to know where David was. However, the second Willow's hands were untied, she unexpectedly slapped Anna across the face. Having been hung up for so long and with weak arms, the slap wasn't very strong, but Anna still felt like she had been played. She grabbed Willow by the collar and yanked her toward her. Willow shoved her away and walked over to George, releasing the ropes binding his hands. As she did, she said, earlier research has shown that multiple personalities can have distinct characteristics, even different allergies. There's no scientific basis for the specific cause yet, though. You just need to know that this theory is valid. Not only can allergens be different, but emotions can also be fully separated. David loves you, and George loves me. Both personalities share each other's memories and can feel the other's emotions. But in my experience with patients suffering from dissociative identity disorder, most are in constant conflict over who controls the body. I've never seen brothers like them, willing to sacrifice for each other. Willow carefully wiped the cuts on George's face. George wrapped his arms around Willow, feeling pain as he touched the wound on her forehead. Only Anna couldn't accept this explanation. She grabbed Willow's collar but was immediately thrown to the ground by Willow with a swift move. Afterward, Willow acted like nothing had happened. Returning to George's side to help him up, she said, let's go, George. The two of them supported each other and left, leaving Anna staring at their retreating figures. Anna lay on the ground, unable to accept the fact that David was gone. The overwhelming despair seemed to consume her. How could he bear to leave her? Anna wandered aimlessly on the streets, George's words echoing in her mind. You killed David. You claimed to love him while seeking other men. You even wanted to have children with other men. Do you understand how he felt? I do. I felt that pain deeply, so much that it almost suffocated me. During the nights you were tangled up with Makoto, he cried alone, licking his wounds. Where were you then? Anna's eyes grew colder as she walked. The true instigator of all this wasn't just her, it was someone else who hadn't faced their retribution yet. Anna arrived at the place where Makoto was staying. Sue's mother had sent her the address before, asking her to visit him more often. When the door opened, Makoto seemed to have just gotten out of the shower, wearing only a towel around his waist. Seeing Anna standing at the door, he immediately pulled her into his arms like a wounded puppy. He said, I knew you wouldn't leave me, Anna. Before Makoto could finish his sentence, Anna shoved him and pushed him into the room, slamming the door behind them. She grabbed Makoto's neck tightly and slapped him hard across the face. Makoto was startled by her sudden aggression. Stumbling backward across the floor, he asked, Anna, what's wrong with you? Anna didn't answer, her eyes filled with murderous intent. Slap after slap, punch after punch landed on Makoto. Then, she grabbed his hair and dragged him to the shower. Turning on the cold water, she locked him inside. She remembered how David had once collapsed in the rain. She also recalled the taunts Makoto had thrown at him. Since the day of David's birthday, he had disappeared, replaced by his brother. But David, the old David, had never shown any intention of harming Makoto, even when he had been bullied to the point of collapse. Now, she was going to return everything that was done to him. All the suffering David had endured, she would make Makoto suffer it all over again. Chapter 18. Makoto clutched Anna's skirt, begging pitifully, Anna, spare me, I know I was wrong. Makoto looked like a stray dog, drenched and kneeling on the ground. Please let me go. Anna stood still, coldly watching him. Finally, she used all her strength to kick him in the lower part of his body. Makoto let out a loud scream before collapsing unconscious. Anna stepped back, satisfied, and dialed her assistant's number. She said, "Come over and take care of this." For the next few days, Anna locked herself in the study, searching for information on dissociative identity disorder. Finally, she found a way to bring David back to life. There had been successful experimental cases abroad. Since Willow had been able to revive George, she could surely bring David back too. Anna couldn't wait any longer and frantically searched for Willow's whereabouts. Eventually, her assistant told her that Willow had been hospitalized after the kidnapping incident and had not been discharged yet. Anna's heart skipped a beat, and regret flooded over her. She almost killed the only person who could save David. Before going to the hospital, her assistant had prepared a fruit basket for her. After all, she had a favor to ask, so she couldn't go empty-handed. Anna held the basket as she stood outside the hospital room. Willow had bandages wrapped around her head, and George was feeding her some porridge. Anna's memories flashed in her mind, overlapping. She remembered when she was in school, and a group of thugs had tried to bully her. It was a typical cliché of a hero saving the damsel in distress. She had gotten injured. Back then, David had been just like he was now, sitting beside her bed, carefully blowing on the porridge in the spoon and feeding her bite by bite. A dull pain struck her heart. The next moment, Anna collected herself and pushed the door open. Both George and Willow turned their heads almost simultaneously. George's smile froze, and he instinctively became a little defensive. He asked, "What do you want?" Willow tugged at George's sleeve and said, "George, calm down. Sit down first." Anna's expression was not pleasant, but she remembered the purpose of her visit. She said, "Dr. Lou, I admit I was wrong before, and I'm willing to cover all of your medical expenses." Willow and George exchanged glances, noticing that Anna seemed like a different person today. Willow asked, "Miss Sue, what do you want? Just say it." Without warning, Anna suddenly knelt down. She said, "You're the only one who can bring David back to life. Please, I beg you. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you, as long as you can bring him back. I can't live without him." George's eyes felt sore. If David saw her like this, would he be happy or heartbroken? Willow gazed out the window, not responding. Although she had already promised George to try and revive David, she wasn't fully confident, and secretly, she wanted to let George live for a while longer. If Anna couldn't live without David, could she let go of George? This was the first time Anna had ever knelt down in front of someone, pleading, "Dr. Lou." Willow replied, "Go back. I can't agree to this." Anna had expected Willow to say this, but she still wanted to try. She had placed all her hope in George. She said, "George, don't you want David to come back to life? After all, this body is David's. I've researched it. He has a chance of coming back." Chapter 19. Anna's eyes were filled with hope. She had always believed that David would come back. She knelt beside George, noticing his hesitation, and nearly begged him humbly. She said, "You care about David too, don't you?" George shoved her away, saying, "You have no right to mention him." Seeing that neither of them was willing to relent, Anna stood up, placed the divorce agreement and a blank check on the table. She said, "The divorce agreement is signed. I only want David to come back. You can fill in any number you like on the check. You don't need to reply right away, but I hope you'll think carefully about my proposal." Without saying another word, Anna turned and left the hospital room. She barely held herself together, her hands trembling slightly. She had offered all she could, just to bring David back. She also understood that asking Dr. Lou to give up George was like her not being able to give up David, but she had no other way. Inside the room, Willow tightly held George's hand. The two of them were not much better off than Anna. Although they wanted to revive David, it wasn't because of the conditions Anna offered. Willow's voice choked as she said, "At least she signed the divorce agreement. You and David are both free now." George nodded. "Right, we'll continue with the plan." After Willow was discharged, George made several inquiries and finally found out where Makoto was staying. He also had people follow Anna, keeping track of her every move. Makoto was living in an old residential building. George thought he had made a mistake and double-checked the address. Makoto, in his memory, was always refined and handsome. There was no way he would live in such a dilapidated place. George covered his nose, disgusted by the smell of pickled vegetables and sewage in the hallway. Finally, at the end of the corridor, he found Makoto's room. The door was slightly ajar. George pushed it open and walked inside. The room was damp, the windows blocked by the buildings in front, leaving no sunlight to come through. The room was cluttered with items in the corners, and leftover takeout boxes were on the table. Makoto was lying on the bed, facing away from the door. He said, "Just leave the takeout on the table and go." When no one answered, Makoto turned around, and upon seeing that it was George, he lay back down. he said. What? Came to watch my misery? George sat on the sofa and calmly asked. Did you get what you wanted? Before he could finish, Makoto suddenly threw the blanket aside, sitting up with a defeated expression, glaring fiercely at George. George noticed that Makoto still had a fecal bag attached to him. George fiddled with his fingers, unbothered. It wasn't me who did this to you, he said. Makoto laughed, but the laughter quickly turned into tears. He said, I know. You want to say I brought it on myself? Yeah, I did. But I still underestimated you, David. Since I was little, my mom never liked me. She only favored my younger brother, always doing everything for him. I thought, someday I'd make it big, earn tons of money, and slap them in the face. I'd show them that it wasn't just my brother who could be good to them. I could too. When I first went to the company on my first day, I saw you in the crowd. You were so dazzling, so brilliant. But why? Why is it that, even though we're both human, you get so much more? That's why I had to be with Anna. I had to become someone superior. Makoto's tears dripped onto the blanket. George just found him laughable. He said, I thought that by climbing onto Anna, one day I'd replace you in her heart. I'd become the person everyone envied. But I underestimated you. You seemed so gentle, but deep down, you're ruthless. Now, I have nothing. It's all because of Anna. She destroyed me with her own hands. From now on, I'm no man. She even ruined my future, and now I'll have to live with this fecal bag. Chapter 20. Makoto's hands trembled. For a man, there was no greater shame than this. George looked at him in this state and spoke. Why not report it to the police? Makoto stubbornly wiped the tears from his face. He truly loved Anna. Despite everything she did to him, he couldn't bring himself to hurt her. George asked, is it worth it, for someone like her? Makoto gave a bitter smile and turned to look at George. He said, isn't it the same for you? Didn't you just take it when I provoked you before? George looked at him and felt as though he was seeing the stubborn David from the past. George replied, that's why I retaliated. You have to love yourself first, before anyone else will love you. Makoto couldn't refute that. He hadn't thought of reporting Anna yet, not because he didn't want to, but because he still harbored a tiny bit of hope. What if one day she remembered the good things he did and came back to him? Was it just about money? Not entirely. He had also invested emotions into this. His feelings for Anna were sincere. He had fantasized countless times about their happy family of 3. But now, everything was gone. A few days later, Anna was arrested, and the person who reported her was Makoto. Having been so close to Anna, Makoto was aware of all the illegal activities in her company. Not only that, but he also went to the hospital to get his injuries checked. He accused Anna of maliciously injuring him, causing him permanent disability. He took the initiative to meet George, and they arranged to meet at a cafe. Makoto took a sip of coffee and said to George solemnly, David, I'm really sorry for what happened before. I ruined your family. If it weren't for me, you've gotten the punishment you deserved. That's enough for me. As for you and Anna, even without you, there would have been someone else. Makoto lowered his head in silence. George asked him, what are your plans for the future? Makoto sighed and said, I want to go back to my hometown, move to a different city, and start over. George nodded, as if all the past had scattered with the wind. A warm feeling brushed through George's heart. If his life was only the time David wasn't here, he would be content. In his next life, he wanted a life of his own, one that would be more colorful and brilliant. Willow had been spending all her time at the hospital recently, researching methods to bring David back. Actually, she was confident it would work, but she couldn't bear to part with George. This time, if David returned, George would completely disappear from this world. Whenever she thought about this, Willow's heart felt as if it had been sliced open by a knife, but it was George's wish, and she had no choice. Finally, Willow succeeded in her research. The drug she developed, along with electrotherapy, could bring David back to life. The procedure was scheduled for 3 days later, and by then, George would have completely disappeared from the world. Willow held George tightly, not wanting to miss a single second. George said, Willow, one last favor. Can you erase all of David's memories of Anna? Willow tightened her grip around George's hand. She said, to this day, you're still thinking about David. George smiled and said, I'm thinking about you too. Find a good man, get married, have children, and live a good life. Tears fell from Willow's eyes, soaking George's collar. In the darkness of the night, the two of them held each other tightly. The day before David was to be revived, George and Willow went together to the prison to visit Anna. He thought to himself that he could clear all the obstacles for David and ensure that he would live a peaceful life, no longer troubled by the outside world. Anna's face was pale as she was escorted out by the guards. There was no emotion left in her eyes when she looked at the two of them. Both of them picked up their phones, but only George spoke. He said, David doesn't have a weak sperm count. It's your ovaries that are the problem. You can't bear children. David will be back in a few days. Anna didn't speak, but tears had already streamed down her face. That night, she went mad. She would suddenly be silent, then frantically say she wanted to find someone, even banging her head against the wall, saying she deserved to die. She was later transferred to a psychiatric hospital. The Sue family's company had declared bankruptcy, and Sue's mother and sister seemed to have fallen from heaven into hell. Selling all their jewelry and designer bags wasn't enough to pay the debts, and they were constantly harassed by debt collectors. The day David was revived, George lay on the operating table, gently brushing Willow's face. "Willow, thank you." He knew that Willow's decision had been incredibly difficult. Anna could never have done the same. Love isn't about possession, it's about fulfillment. Anna never understood this. Willow shook her head, her eyes reddening, as she watched George take the medicine. Willow personally adjusted the equipment for him, even though she was filled with reluctance. She knew George's time had come. She stepped back to the control room, placed her hand on the switch, and after a long moment, she took a deep breath and closed her eyes as she pressed it. George stared at the ceiling, slowly closing his eyes. A tear rolled down his cheek, and the words, "I love you," still never made it out of his mouth. He couldn't let himself be Willow's burden. George remained unconscious, and Willow stayed by his side, never leaving. This was her first time performing such an experiment, and she wasn't fully confident. Finally, 3 days later, he woke up. Willow cautiously walked to his side, filled with both hope and fear. When he spoke, all her hopes were shattered. "Dr. Lou, how did I end up here?" David had truly returned, and George had completely disappeared from this world. Chapter 21. David had almost forgotten all memories of George and Anna. Willow helped him find his home. After undergoing this experiment, people would experience a period of memory confusion. Willow had promised George that she would help David restore and piece together a complete life story about him. Willow took David back to the home that George had carefully arranged for him. It felt both familiar and strange to him. He didn't remember when he had bought such a house, one where even the smallest details in the corners were perfectly to his liking. Curious, he asked, "Dr. Lou, were we really good friends?" Willow smiled and said, "You could say we were good friends." David nodded, though vaguely, his mind a blank canvas. He didn't know where to begin, but deep down, he felt that not recalling those things might actually be better for him. Willow took him to the basement and into the car that George had prepared for him. He nervously sat in the driver's seat and said, "Dr. Lou, you must be mistaken. I don't know how to drive." Willow reached into the glove compartment and handed him his driving license and registration. She said, "You've forgotten again. You can drive, and quite well, actually." Although David had forgotten George, the skills George had taught him were still embedded in him. Thanks to muscle memory, he touched the steering wheel, instinctively started the car, and once he got used to it, he excitedly shouted, "Dr. Lou, I really can drive." Willow set the navigation system for their destination, the David Gallery. The road felt strangely familiar, and David drove smoothly, almost effortlessly. He subconsciously muttered, "Indeed, the steering wheel should always be in your hands." This phrase felt so familiar. Willow had heard George say it before. In an instant, Willow's nose tingled with emotion, and as she gazed out the window, a storm of feelings stirred in her heart. Though she forced herself to maintain composure, the journey was nearly uninterrupted, and they quickly arrived at the gallery's entrance. Willow pulled out a key from the car and handed it to him. David, startled, covered his mouth and asked, "This gallery, is it mine?" Willow nodded and smiled. David said, "During the time I lost my memory, did I really accomplish all these remarkable things?" Willow silently watched as he opened the gallery door, only to see the large orange cat run out from inside, nuzzling him affectionately. But before long, the cat jumped down and refused to come out no matter how much David coaxed it. Willow's heart tightened. Only she and the cat could tell the difference between David and George. David began his quiet life, filling his days with fulfilling routines. He checked his bank account, and the numbers behind the decimal point were terrifyingly large. It seemed as though he had everything, yet something felt missing. He focused all his attention on the gallery, and although he was busy every day, life felt full. One day, he received an order for a store's decorative painting, and when he delivered the painting, the recipient immediately recognized him. He said, "Mr. Wong, what are you doing here? How is Miss Sue?" David waved his hand and said, "You've mistaken me. I don't know any Miss Sue." The man persisted, then pulled out a photo from his phone, one of David and Anna together. He said, "How could I be mistaken? Sue Miss Anna." The man in the photo did look exactly like David, but the woman beside him, David didn't recognize. He took the delivery slip from the customer, politely said goodbye, and quickly left. Anna. A sharp pain shot through his temples. He crouched on the ground for a while, feeling miserable, before he could regain his composure. Back at the gallery, He sat in the rocking chair, and to his surprise, the large orange cat jumped up beside him. He held the cat and drifted off into a deep sleep in the rocking chair. He had a dream. In the dream, there was someone who looked exactly like him, and there was a woman who was always facing away from him. Every time he tried to see her face clearly, he would be interrupted by a headache, as if some force were preventing him from uncovering the truth. For the next month, Willow often came by the gallery to check on him. Every time she visited, she would hug the orange cat, ask about his well-being, and inquire about the daily running of the gallery. She also reminded him that he could contact her anytime if he needed help. Before leaving, David gave her a painting. Willow took it and instantly thought of George. The painting depicted the first rays of morning light. George had once promised her that they would watch a sunrise together, but they never did. Willow controlled her emotions well and thanked him politely. She said, "Thank you, David. I'll leave now, but if you need anything, call me." David smiled and waved her goodbye. His eyes glistening with unshed tears, he said, "Goodbye, sister-in-law."